On a holiday where, by religious law, I was not permitted to play a musical instrument, I was narrating, poesizing in a holy place, an epic about first things, first meetings, great personages, large ideas, and magic, in verse form that I had written to introduce the occasion. It was a long poem, a good 40 minutes, sweeping through the centuries of mostly Middle Eastern lore and thought. The story carried well enough. My audience was rapt, but several minutes into it, I began to tap on the podium where I had placed my pages. The tap-tapping turned into rhythm, what I would have to call a percussion track, and the rest of the poem was punctuated by my hands, tap-tap slapping out an accompanying Middle Eastern set of rhythms on the podium behind which I stood. The audience was stunned. That guy's playing the table. Middle Eastern rhythms are by nature complex and central to the song and the poem. I had not intended to accompany the piece I had written with table drums, but the soundtrack erupted with the language, and I knew the spontaneity of the performance incantation was honest and ascendant, and I had the room moving in unison and polyrhythm with the story I was telling in poetic form. What is this particular form of performance art? I was thinking as I was watching myself do something I had never done before. So I began to accompany my poems with rhythms knocked out on whatever table or platform I was standing on or behind. Once at Duff's at a poetry reading, I played a huge empty whiskey cask barrel while I intoned my poem. A few days after the first performance, at the podium I was speaking to my guitar-playing pal in Phoenix on the telephone. I told him the story of speaking my poem in the spontaneous overflow of the hand jive on the podium behind which I stood. "I love this story," my musician pal said. Musicians generally love the eruption of new forms, especially spontaneous ones. He told the story to a pal of his in Arizona who was a percussionist and a carpenter. This story of his friend in St. Louis speaking poetry, playing a podium. "I love this story," said his friend, the percussionist carpenter, and he built something to honor the tale because it gave him an idea and because he could. He sent it to me in 3 pieces, a zebra wood playable podium set onto a metal stand with a celestial blue plexiglass contraption to hold papers on top. It is a cajon in the form of a reading stand. A cajon is a playable wood percussion instrument, generally a box shape that the player sits on and beats out rhythms. Inside the cajon, the wood is adjusted to project in a variety of different tones. It is used to great effect in Peruvian and Cuban music. They are generally boxed shaped. Mine is a podium made of zebra wood. Zebra wood is a striped wood, light, that is found in Central America. My cajon sings when I play it, and it is visually stunning. Last year at this time, I had written another poetry piece about the 8 nights of Hanukkah that parsed the story in at least 8 ways, sometimes 9 ways, because the tale, like all our tales, are multivalenced, many layers and interpretations. In the poem I had written, each night was given a different sense. The complete piece was a new form, an adult treatment honoring the complexity of ideas that are suggested by what was once called by the historian Josephus the Festival of Lights, Phota. Just before the Festival of Lights last year, I met Brothers Lazaroff. a working band of young guys playing their own brand of what I heard as roots-inspired, folk-inflected, kicking, electric tune-smithing, eclectic. I liked their music and I liked them. The music was something new old to me. I hadn't been into a music scene outside of my teaching in my own little place here, performing for a long time. But there was something familiar in what they were playing. They invited me to perform my piece, 8 nights, during Hanukkah at a club in my town called Off Broadway, backed up by their band. They had created all kinds of sound environments to accompany the piece, using many instruments and styles in ways I'd never heard. I joined them at Off Broadway, and it was so exhilarating. The next week we were in a recording studio, recording the concert 8 nights. I was unsure whether it was to be spoken or sung, or whether that distinction held at all for me anymore. In Hebrew, the same word applies to both poem and song. Shir, it's a poem, it's a song. I get that. Songs are poems, poems are musical. I knew that rooted truth of music and word. I was conscientious not to drift too far away from it. The CD we made, 8 nights, sold wildly on a website called Bandcamp, and we donated all the proceeds last year to the Jewish Food Pantry. We're performing it again this year, newly expanded with more musicians and more rehearsals. The proceeds this year will go to 3 projects that I run that serve the most forgotten individuals I know: a prison outreach, an attention to mental illness, and an outreach on addictions called Shalva, which means serenity. All 3 projects I call One Life, Whole World, from a quote from the Talmud: to save a single life is to save an entire world. I told David Lazaroff the story of the Podium I play. I love the story, he said. Bring the Podium. There are a lot of musicians, so I also bought a brand new old instrument that is a variation on an ancient instrument I play called the oud. The oud is the ancestor of the lute. It is a quiet, is an intimate instrument. I study it in the summertime with a master on the shores of the Eastern Mediterranean. I am always challenged how to integrate the ancient and the contemporary, the old and the new, the familiar and the spontaneous through the oud, beloved of all cultures around the Eastern Mediterranean, ancestor in wood, to the world split apart by differences in branches, but not roots. Roots are common. We have a common sound, cultures that have forgotten how much we are the same. It is clear in sound, if nothing else, through what I call our double course sister. I am your double course sister, my modal figure, my yearning for a voice. I am a single line. I am the melodic snake advancing by half-flats. I am the hands of Ziryab, the blackbird, the one born in Baghdad. I am oud player to the court of the Umayyads, Cordoba, 8th century, Ziryab, the dark one. I am your hands. I am the rishi in your hands, the eagle feather, as you pluck the strings. I am the 5th course of strings introduced by Ziryab, the soul, added to the 4 courses, the 4 humors of Aristotle. I am the soul, the 5th course. I am the hands of the old man sitting by the 7th well. I am the 6th course. I am resolute, the absolute. Last year, the sound techs at the gig couldn't quite amplify my traditional whispering oud on stage at Off-Broadway, but an electric oud had just come out, developed by a clever company in Quebec, and after the concert I bought it. David made up some pedals for me by which I can control the sound and volume. When I play my electric oud in our ensemble, I feel like I'm riding a horse with octane. At first it was a little wild for me, this horse. I wasn't used to such horsepower, but I'm getting used to it. Thus the story of my zebra drum high octane lute 8 nights poesying with a brand of curious spontaneists, making new sounds out of old stories. Come hear us, 8 nights, Off-Broadway, Saturday night, December 8th, 9 p.m., $8 for a life-saving cause.